Well, we're going to start moving into characters from here. 'Cause, I, probably my fault. You're giving us a lot, and we're very thankful. But your creative team made Gwen Stacy in the start of the show out from a timid introvert who hid her feelings from Peter into more of a blossoming beauty that was akin to the Steve Ditko and John Romita design transitions from the original comics in the 60s. What led to going down that road for the character?
Well, I think the main thing was that we felt that, we were very consciously pulling in characters from a lot of different eras. I mean, obviously we wanted all those great Lee Ditko characters, including Flash and Liz Allen, and then we wanted these great Lee Romita characters like Gwen and Harry and MJ, and then, we were even going further than that and pulling in Eddie Brock and all sorts of guys from way later in the continuity, and we were pretty shameless about it. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but, one of the things that we decided early on was that, okay, we all know what Harry was like in college. We read those comics. But we're not meeting him in college. What if we were meeting him in high school? We all know what MJ was like in college. But what if we met her a few years before that? And likewise, what if we met Gwen a few years before that? And so, we tried to do a couple things. One of them was that Gwen was always the smart science girl. She was in college. She was the hot as hell smart science girl, but she was, the one who took all of the same classes Peter took. And Peter was the sort of transcendent genius who was still never that great because he was always ditching out to be Spider-Man, but still he was always the really brilliant guy. But Gwen kept up with him, class for class. She was always in his science classes. And Harry was the one who was always sort of failing, those classes. So we're like, well, all right, yeah, we could just have her be the hot blonde in high school too, but is that really all that interesting? Doesn't it make more sense if you're the geeky, nerdy science girl that, not everybody blossoms in high school. Some people blossom later. And because we wanted to create contrast between Mary Jane and Gwen, and contrast between Liz Allen and Gwen, and contrast between all these different ladies, we were going to play, like I said, a Peter Parker who could be easily distracted and easily infatuated with whatever girl happened to be in front of him. We wanted to have a diversity in our female lineup, so to speak, and yet we knew we wanted to have that face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot moment with Mary Jane. It's like, well, all right, if Mary Jane's going to be hot all the way back to high school, maybe Gwen isn't. And so it was about extrapolating backwards for some of these characters who we knew in college, but all right, what were they like back in high school? If we actually met them 3 or 4 years earlier, what would we have thought of them then? And try and do that. So the decision to make Gwen a little bit of a female Peter Parker, that is the Peter Parker pre-Spider-Man Peter Parker, was kind of a no-brainer to provide this contrast and try and create a Gwen who you just had to fall in love with, that you couldn't not love, that you totally get why, it would be his first great love. And there were other adjustments too. I mean, for me, because I'm so old, can I say something? You may have to bleep me, but in any event, I'm so effing old, I don't forget Betty Brant, because I grew up, Betty Brant was his first girlfriend. And now you look at it and you go, okay, the girl who is working as J. Jonah Jameson's assistant, and I'm trying to go back and look at the clues and go, okay, so what is the deal here? Is the deal that, and this was possible back in the 60s, that a girl would drop out of high school and be 16 or 17 years old, but be working for, have dropped out of high school, but be working as a secretary. Was that the idea, or was the idea that, no, she was a few years older than Peter, she was out of high school, and ultimately we decided to go that route, which is that, okay, she's, 20, at a high school, didn't go to college, became an assistant, and, became Jonah's assistant because she's the one who could take him, My thinking is that Jonah used to go through assistants every 2 days, until she came out of the temp pool or the steno pool or whatever you want to call it in 2008, and she could take him, She
like
could take his,
right?
She could take his baloney, and she could take his pomposity, and she could take his temper tantrums and deal. And that Jonah, for all his Jonah-ness, recognizes talent, and was smart enough to realize, all right, I got to hold on to this one, and so she winds up sticking with it. But what that means is that if she's 20 years old and the 16-year-old guy's hitting on her, it may wear her down because he is kind of funny and he is kind of cute and this kind of thing. And so maybe, all right, God, I'm not going to your prom, all right? I'm not a high school kid. I'm not going to your prom. All right, I'll think about it until Aunt May sort of says, you're just too old for him, dear. And then
what I like to refer as the cock block of the year, but that's besides the point. But
now you got to bleep you.
Yeah. Well, we actually said that on the air too, and it did get the anger. So, but our personal opinion on the Spec Webs podcast is that this iteration of Gwen Stacy is a vast improvement over the 1960s Marvel Comics girlfriend archetype that Gwen was from the comics, embodied in the original issues. To this day, many fans see her as Peter Parker's true love interest, despite there being actual reasoning for that being so outside the fact that they were together when she died. In Spectacular Spider-Man, the show's representation of Gwen in high school vastly differed from her in college. Is this a wholly unique interpretation of the character, or do you think this is how she would have been at the age of 16 if Stan and Steve had her in Peter's original supporting cast?
Well, I don't want to be presumptuous vis-a-vis, Stanley, Steve Ditko. I don't want to sit here and say, oh yeah, that's how they would have done it, the way I did it. That sounds too obnoxious for words, frankly. But what I will say is that I tried my best to use their Gwen as a starting point for both, again, extrapolating backwards and extrapolating forwards. I mean, again, if Gwen is like this here, if we want to contrast her with Mary Jane, where are we going to find her at age 16? Our guiding thing on the series as a whole, not just with Gwen, but with everything, was always Stan, Steve, and Jazzy Johnny. That was where we went to first for everything. We borrowed stuff from Ultimate Spider-Man, we borrowed stuff from the movies, we borrowed stuff from Untold Tales of Spider-Man, we borrowed from all over the place, and shamelessly, again, that was our source material. But fundamentally, it was the Lee Ditko, Lee Romita stuff that was our Bible. So I don't want to be presumptuous about that's what they would have done. It's more like, hey, we were inspired by them, not the other way around. And what I know about Gwen Stacy is this was not the last, but the first great love of Peter Parker's life. And for that to be true, for it not to just be another Liz Allen or another Betty Brant, that is someone he dated or was interested in for a while, but someone who he loved desperately and would have married had things worked out differently, you had to love Gwen. Just like later, you have to learn to, you have to love MJ. She can't ultimately just be a party girl and nothing else. You have to go deeper than that. And so we tried to create a Gwen, and I'm going to say this very consciously, and this includes, the tremendous work of Lacey Chabert playing Gwen. Oh, yeah. That you have to create a Gwen that not just Peter, but that Peter in fact is behind the audience. If we're doing our job right, the audience falls in love with Gwen before Peter even figures out that that's who he's in love with. That Venom, God, I did it again. That Venom figures it out. Venom figures it out before Peter does. Venom figures out that Peter's in love with Gwen before Peter figures out that Peter's in love with Gwen. That this is the person that he's got the deepest connection to at this stage in his life. And that was, I don't want to make it sound calculating, because that's what we had to do to make it was just, because it goes beyond calculation, it's just essential. If we don't do that, then we've blown it,
Yeah.
So, there just wasn't any choice in the matter. We had to make that work, or else we'd have failed. If it works for you guys, I'm thrilled, because that was just essential to what we needed to do for the character.